a lot of heat and a lot of coal and a lot of carbon is burned when you're doing forge welding, because you got to get it so hot and keep it there so long. So in the wintertime, it's a good time to do a lot of forge welding.
Okay.
So,
Right.
all right.
Makes sense.
That's the coal aspect. And you know that one of the bad things for forge welding is oxygen. And why is that?
Oxygenation and delamination.
It is, I don't know about that, it's because it forms scale.
Yeah.
Scale will not forge weld. You've got to have really liquid metal, what you got to have. So, let me explain that real quick. And that'll be another cornerstone of your knowledge base for forge welding. So, your fire is part of it, and what's going on the metal is another part of it. So, if you have two pieces of metal you want to forge weld together, and you've got scale on it, you got to get it off, because scale will not forge weld. As well, to reduce scale chemically back to base metal, it takes about a 3,000 degree temperature. With the original wrought iron that welded at 2,900, guess what? It welded at the same temperature as scale reduced back to base metal. So they didn't have to use a whole lot of flux, because what does flux do? Flux takes, in our case, does two or three things. One, it takes the scale and reduces it chemically back to metal instead of metal oxide. It reduces it and gets rid of the oxygen and puts it back to base metal. The other thing it does is it protects the surface from seeing any oxygen.
Correct.
So then you can't mix scale. So now you got the scale taken care of. The other thing it does is if there's any that you didn't have enough flux or something like that, and there's any scale left in the joint, it's liquid. It's a thick layer of liquid around this thing on both sides.
Ready to bond.
And no, the flux goes away, but what it does with it is it takes that scale with it. When you hit it and it splatters,
Okay.
it's the flux that's going away.
Okay.
And if it's got scale or any other crap, debris, fire debris or anything, it flows like a river and it washes it out of the joint. Okay? So what you're after on a given piece, on a weld, you want a weld right here? What you're after, no oxygen, get rid of the scale, and you want, taking a microscope and looking at it, you've got the joint, you've got the metal. You really want, right there's your flux. Well, right there's your flux. I drew something in there, I hadn't told you what it is yet. Here's your flux, and it's protecting the surfaces, both sides, from scaling and also reducing, because it's chemically active. When it's at high temperature, it's chemically active. But right beneath the flux is you want it to liquefy. You want it solid here, and here you might have a millionth of an inch or a thousandth of an inch that's liquid on both pieces. And when you hit it together, when you hit it on, it squishes out all of the liquid flux and the impurities, and the two liquid layers of metal touch and freeze.
Yeah.
Guess what you got then? You got one piece of steel. That's welding.
Okay.
When you end up, when you can't tell, there's a joint there. Let's see, let me get this straight. When you can't tell there's a joint there anymore, it's because this is solid metal and this is solid metal, and there's no impurities left in there. And it's in the solid, in the liquid that was on the surface here and the liquid that was on the surface there have been pushed together and they've solidified, because this is a little bit cooler than the liquid was.
And the liquid flux with impurities has been swished out.
Exactly. And you'll see it flying when you tap it with a hammer, and you don't have to hit it hard. A lot of people think you have got to hammer hard to do a forge weld. You do not have to hit it hard. In fact, it's better if you use a small hammer and hit light, because you pack it, you get these to touch quicker,
quickly.
And you only got a few seconds.
Like toothpaste.
Exactly. It happens quicker when you can hit more times.
Okay.
And then if you got to hit it hard later on, hit it hard later on.
Strike while it's hot.
Okay. So one of the other things, so here's a process for a forge weld. So you got a background here of what you need to do a forge weld. Mm-hmm. One of the other things is always, if figure out a way, always upset the end or upset the area to make it bigger than base metal, because when you do your weld, you're going to hit it and you're going to fin it. And I've done this before. So first upset it, and then you make from the upset, from the big upset. In the case of two pieces where you're going to weld the ends together, you hit it and you make it. You end up making it look like that. You got a big swelled area here because you got extra material. Mm-hmm. And then the other side
is going to match.
Exactly. And what happens is when you bring them out of the fire now, welding temperature, if you touch here and you touch here, those tips are liquid and they fuse. And then you can go to work on the centers. Boom, boom, boom. Flip it over. Boom, 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 boom. Okay. And you work your way towards the end and you're squeezing out all of the impurities and flux, and you're really making it a hard attachment here. The other thing is, and we'll get to the intricacies of that in a minute, what you're ended up wanting to do, you want your forge welds to look, if it's two pieces that you're welding the ends together, you want them to look like your thumbs. Okay, imagine your little tip on the end. But see how they're rounded this way as well as this way? They touch in the center. That's where your first blow. I like to
squeeze it.
I like to hit it on the end, just make sure it's good and attached.
Uh-huh.
Then I can manipulate it without tongs or anything. But then I start working on that center hard, so to speak hard. And so that's what a forge weld, a good forge weld. See how big and thick it is here and here, and then you can always thin it down.
Yeah.
Once you got that forge weld
you
made,
can't add metal
you
to
can't.
it.
It's really hard to make it thicker, especially after it's forge weld.
Yeah.
One other thing is once you've made that weld, if you got to work it and hammer it hard to thin it out or whatever, do it at welding temperature, virtually welding temperature. You don't want it to spark, but you want to see it very, very, very hot because when you start, especially if you start working this cold, every time you hit a hammer blow, there's a tremendous amount of stress generated wherever you struck it inside that weld. And these are not like modern structural welds where you've got perfect conditions and perfect materials. They will come apart, especially if you work in cold.
Okay.
Because you think about what you do when you hit something with a hammer.
And cold could just be 500 degrees less.
Exactly. Cold is red hot in this case.
Right.
So you want it up around nearly over 2,000 degrees. So you think about when you hit something flat, don't pretend this is flat. You hit it right there while it's hot or cold, it don't matter. That stays there, but right here goes that way,
It deforms all the metal.
yeah, and it deforms the top more than the bottom. So you're putting in differential stresses everywhere. That's why you do it hot. Then you reduce the amount of stress in that weld. So don't work it cold.
Okay.
And you will learn that if you do work it cold.
Okay.
It will break once in a while. It will break on you.
Okay.
All right.